Oh, thank you very much. We are Counting Coup. We're so happy to be here to celebrate with ACLU tonight. We're going to play a few songs here to get it kicked off, and then we'll be back later on. We just came out with an album. It's called Rugged, Rowdy, and Broken. And this one here, we're going to start with the lead track from that album. It's called Something Strong. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're Counting Coup. This is the first time we're playing in Missoula, as a matter of fact. Thank you for the warm welcome. Yeah. We might have saw some of you this summer at Red Ants Pants and White Sulphur. If we did, come say hi. We'd love to say hi again. This next song is one I wrote about just minding your own business. I get this feeling people think it's wrong to love you. Then I think about what you would have done if it was me. So God gave me grace when He took you. So I hold on to her to let go of you. Won't you let us be? Yeah, we found each other. Won't you let us be? I said we love each other. Won't you let us be? Yeah, we saved each other. Why don't you let us be? Let us be. Let us be. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Some people say a man is made out of mud. A poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood. Skin and bones and a mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, you know I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Well, I was born one morning in the drizzling rain, a fighting and a trouble, my middle name. I was raised in the canebrake vine, oh mama line. Ain't no high-tone woman make me walk the line. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, you know I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Well, I was born one morning in the the sun didn't shine. I picked up a shovel, I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons, number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, bless my soul, you loaded 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, you know I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. This is Brendan Fritzler next to me playing that harmonica for y'all. I call him Mr. B. Fritzler. And if you see B coming, you better step aside. Step aside. A lot of men didn't, a lot of men died. There's one fist of iron, the other is steel. If the right one don't get you, then his left one will. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, you know I can't go. 'Cause I owe my soul to the company store. Hey, Brendan Fritzler on the phone over there. Play a song from the Woodstock era about cooperation, which I think we could all use a little bit more of right now. Well, together we stand, divided we fall. Come on now, people, let's all get on the ball and work together. Come on, let's work together. Come on now, people. 'Cause together we will stand, every boy, every woman, and Toby Falcon on that electric guitar, Matt Cool on the drums behind me. Alright. Well, we're so happy to be here with the ACLU tonight celebrating, and I see some signs up here that's got a lot of First Nations language on it. That is so cool to see. We're Counting Coup from Billings, Montana. 3 of us are Native American. And this next song will reflect some of that. It's kind of from a perspective of growing up with that generational shame and generational trauma. And how we have made a conscious choice to rise above that. Weather warming yearly. Where, oh, where did my people go? Get out and vote. Faith in my people. And this is not the end of the trail. No, it ain't. Thank y'all so very much. We are Counting Cool. We'll be back at the end of the program tonight. Bring you guys all on home. Thank you so much. We'll see you in a little bit.
Still trying.
Everybody give it up for Counting Coup. Now, folks, I see a lot of you. You're standing at the back. You're probably eating food, which I think is great. But also, we have lots of seats for you up here if you'd like to come in. I promise I only bite on Tuesdays. My name is Kevin Hammond. It's my honor tonight to be the MC for this 50th anniversary celebration. It's amazing to me that the ACLU in Montana is celebrating 50 years. I too am coming up on 50 years, and I'm feeling a lot more old and creaky than the organization. I can tell you that right now. First off, the ACLU of Montana acknowledges that we are in traditional and current homelands of the Bitterroot Salish, the Kootenai, the Kalispel, along with the Blackfoot Confederacy and many other nations who utilize this area. Today, we honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come. We recognize and honor the resilience of all tribal people and further acknowledge our role as stewards of this land and its resources for future generations. Now, I would like to thank all of you because you showed up. And here's the thing about the work that the ACLU does. It can only happen when y'all show up. So some of you might know some of the things that have been going on recently which feel like backsliding. And thankfully we haven't backslid that much because the ACLU continues to stand up. So, tonight, we're here to honor some people. We're here to pay respects to each other, to honor the things that the ACLU has done, and to celebrate how cool it is that we've changed the world. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Kevin Kickingwoman. Kevin is an enrolled member of the Blackfeet Nation and also has Cree ancestry. Kevin served in the Navy for 4 years and has dedicated his career to teaching and learning and sharing cultural knowledge. He has experience in radio broadcasting and teaching students from kindergarten through high school. Kevin lives, and practices his native ceremonies, traditions, singing, and dancing. He's an active member of many of the societies of the Blackfeet people. His passion for singing has brought him respect, acclamation, and acknowledgement. His singing, sharing, and teaching others has impacted and enriched so many lives. Kevin is a proud father to 6 children and grandfather to 1 granddaughter, Cookie, who is his pride and joy. Please welcome to the stage, Kevin Kickingwoman.
Well, move up if you guys need to. You guys look like you're in church. It's good to be here. What an honor to be here for 50 years, ACLU. Fighting for equal rights and for everyone out there that is marginalized. It is awesome to come here. I was sitting here thinking about today as I was coming over, and I was having a discussion with some of the students that I was teaching today, and we were talking about energy and what it meant to the Blackfeet people. And when you talk about energy in our ways, I suppose you must put it in the concept of the language, because language is the number one feature of who we are as human beings. And so I was talking about how the Spomita Peaks, the above beings, we call upon every morning Achimoyi when we get up to pray. And we get up to pray every morning and say our blessings. And we also call those above beings the sun, the moon, and the stars. You know, we're DNA with the stars. And I talked about how we Suita Peaks, the water beings, all those water beings, those animals and things under the water, the rivers, the ocean, the rivers and ponds. And I talked about Sahakomita Peaks, all these human beings and everything on this earth that consists of life and rocks and everything, the animacy of this earth, of human beings, of how we must all live together. And the last is the Natuita Peaks. And those spirit beings, my grandparents, my ancestors who crossed over to the other side, when all those beings come together and we call upon them before the sun rises in the morning, Achimoyi, and we get up to pray and say our blessings to the east, I think you say there's a word in Blackfoot called kakyoksin. That means alignment. And when you align yourself with that energy that's out there, the unseen, but it's there, you find Matapi, the human being. And so that's what I wish for you all because of the work you do. Find the energy to keep going because the work you're doing is so admirable, you know, that to step out there and help other people and fight for justice and things of that nature. You know, I grew up in household 7 foster homes and had child abuse, severe child abuse. And if it wasn't for me getting up in the morning and looking to the east and seeing the sun come up every morning and seeing it set in the evening in the west, the sun is my witness. And so I always think about that, how the energy of how things keep you going. You're going to have good and bad times. That's just the way it is. If everything was good, we'd have nothing to look forward to. So remember, guys, keep striving, keep doing what you need to do. I'm going to sing a song. It's called the Coming Together Song. And this is just what it's for. And I'll say a prayer in my tongue. And at the end, I want to sing a thank you song. And those thank you songs, I'll explain it where you stand. And you basically just stand and dance in one place and give thanks because we're here, guys. We get up and we say our blessings, not because I got a new Ford truck or whatnot. You get up because you get to see each other again. You get to see your grandkids. You get to see this earth one more time. All right? And love one another. Love one another. Hapistatuki, hatuitapiks, swamitapiks, suitapiks, sachkomitapiks, hayochtuki, anochshiskana, tuni spomokin, nach geseis cheats and nach gesei kakimats and nach ikimuts and nach okomatuts and nach awatuitaxen an spomokin, nach konits and Nitsitapia piki nitsipochsen, gemoken na natuistatuts, and in an anunix, ginexistan anunix, ginaxits anunix. Nitsitapimix, pikani waki sixicatapi, wakiamskapi pikani, kiapatsi pikani coax. I on apinat dusi, noxpomos, ACLU, apotakix, hokinapinat dusi. Nitsitapia pi gemiska gusik, six gimetap, siakamoten, gen. Hi. The song I'll sing is the thank you song. Ay yo hey 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 ah yeah 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 ah yeah yeah hey ah yeah yeah ah yeah ah yeah ah yeah ah yo ho ho. Hey, 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 ah, hey, hey, ah, hey, 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 ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ho, ho. Thank you.
Montana has many natural resources and many exports. One of our greatest exports, though, is our people. And this next person is one of those people who, while yes, she's gone on to little schools like Yale or the law school at New York University and found amazing success, at some point, she graduated from Hellgate High School right here in town. And while she may have left Montana for a little while, she found her way back and became the executive director of the Montana ACLU. Please welcome Executive Director Caitlin Borgman.
Welcome. We're really excited to have you all here to celebrate 50 years of fighting for civil rights and liberties in Montana. I want to first acknowledge and thank our staff and board members. So if you could stand up, wave, please give them a round of applause. And I think I see Scott Crichton over there. I want to thank Scott Crichton, first full-time paid executive director of the ACLU of Montana, who led the organization for nearly 3 decades. And then finally, I want to thank the ACLU Montana supporters, clients, ally organizations, including the organizations tabling on the floor today. We couldn't do the work without them. We are here today, yeah. We're here today to honor our past as we work to build a better future. 1972 was a special year. Montana got a brand new, uniquely rights-protective constitution, and the ACLU of Montana was born. Over our 50 years, we have won historic fights that have formed some of the building blocks of the work that we're still doing today, including on voting rights, Windy Boy versus Bighorn County, which was the first case in the nation to apply the National Voting Rights Act to challenge an at-large voting system that discriminated against Indigenous voters. In criminal legal reform, we brought the lawsuit White versus Martz that established the statewide public defender system to replace the old county-by-county system. And in LGBTQ equality, we secured the right to marriage for same-sex couples months ahead of the US Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell versus Hodges. Today, our large and growing staff is continuing to work hard to protect and secure Indigenous justice, criminal legal reform, the right to vote, access to abortion, LGBTQ equality, and more. We do this work through a combination of lawsuits, legislative and policy advocacy, community organizing, and communications and public education. We are incredibly proud to have started the first Indigenous Justice program in the history of the nationwide ACLU organization here at the ACLU of Montana. We do this work alongside and led by Indigenous community members throughout Montana. When we talk about honoring our history, this must include uplifting and honoring the first peoples of Montana who lived here and stewarded this land since time immemorial, long before Montana was colonized and became a state. Our Indigenous justice work honors this history of tribal nations, communities, and individuals fighting the ongoing impacts of colonization. Our other top priority is to reverse the criminalization of poverty. We fight in the legislature, courts, and local communities to reform a failed criminal, quote-unquote, justice system that is two-tiered. One system for people who can afford to buy their freedom, and another that traps people living in poverty in a hopeless maze with injustices at every turn. We'll hear more in just a moment about what our current and future work looks like when we chat with some of our staff and Mike Dennison. You all know that there are hard fights ahead for civil liberties in Montana. We are well-equipped and revved up for these fights. For tonight, let's pause and celebrate the past 50 years and let this history inspire us for the next 50. Thank you.
Make me run across the stage. Not my skill set. Who wants to see me run? No one. That's not a thing. Now we're going to have a panel discussion, and up first, I'd like to introduce Mike Dennison. He was the chief political reporter for MTN News from 2015 until he retired earlier this year. And prior to MTN News, Mike had a 23-year career as a newspaper reporter covering Montana politics and state government, focusing on campaigns, the legislature, healthcare, energy, the environment, and many other issues important to Montana. Mike, come on up. I'll introduce the rest of the panel really quick. The panel will consist of Executive Director Caitlin Borgman, Alex Raitt, the Legal Director of ACLU Montana, Keegan Medrano is the Advocacy and Policy Director of the ACLU Montana, and Sharon Kickingwoman is the Indigenous Justice Program Manager at the ACLU of Montana. They're going to have a panel on what's going on, what they're doing, what work is coming up, and if you have any questions for the panel, Gigi is going to be going around. We have cards and pencils so you can write your questions down, and we'll collect them at the end of the panel so that we can ask more questions of them and you can find out exactly what you want to know. Give it up for the panel.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Kevin, for that introduction, and thank everyone for coming tonight. Glad to see a good turnout here. You heard a little bit of the summary of what the ACLU of Montana is up to from Caitlin. We're going to delve more deeply into all those topics and about just what they mean and what the ACLU is doing here in Montana. First off, you heard Indigenous justice mentioned several times in some of the opening comments. We know that Indigenous justice is a big priority for the ACLU of Montana. And first we're going to go to Keegan, who's going to talk about what Indigenous justice means and how that's manifested in the ACLU of Montana's current work and efforts across the state.
Definitely. I think, we often get that question, sort of like, what is Indigenous justice? And I think at its core, Indigenous justice is about our unwavering commitment to the inherent sovereignty of tribal nations in Montana. And so what that means is that we're committed to protecting and emboldening tribal nations and Indigenous communities' abilities to live, to steward the land, to take care of each other, and to practice our religious and cultural practices. So that's really it at its core. But Indigenous justice is more than just that. It's also focusing on and addressing issues which are unique to our communities. Some of the ways that we see that manifest is in the crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women. We also see that, though, in the disproportionate impacts in accessing abortions, in accessing the ballot box, and we also see that in over-incarceration of Indigenous folks. And so that's two of the ways that Indigenous justice sort of shows itself in our work. And then in the last way that it shows itself is our commitment as an organization to staff and to center Indigenous people at the organization and to sort of radically reject and to offer a transformative new world. And that's sort of the ways that we see it show itself in our work. And Sharon here will talk a little bit more about how that is in the day-to-day practices.
Awesome, thank you, Keegan. What I want to reiterate is that what Caitlin had mentioned, that our Indigenous Justice Program is the first of its kind for all ACLUs. And I think that can't be understated and is a historic thing, and it's something that has really taken hold across the ACLU affiliate network. And that's something that's really worthy of being celebrated and something that originated right here at our affiliate. So that's something that I'm proud of, and I hope that we all are. So to expand a little bit on what Keegan was talking about, I wanted to touch a little bit on our approach, like what does that mean? What is Indigenous justice? And for me, when I think about Indigenous justice, or IJ as we call it, like what does justice for Indigenous people look like? And personally, I think about the freedom to just be, to just exist. And that's what IJ is at its core. It's about enhancing sovereignty over ourselves, over our families, over our communities, and ultimately our nations. And it's the ability to be able to engage in our language, in our lifeways, in our land, and the things that we have always known to be true. So the spirit of our Indigenous justice work starts in community, and the approach we use is an organizing model, which is, seeking true partnership and collaboration. It's one that's built in trust and understanding. So every single issue is an Indigenous issue, and that's the approach we take. As everything comes across our desk, we try to think about, what does that mean? So what does it look like? It takes a lot of form. So again, our work started in community. We went across a listening tour, listening to people about what was on their hearts and minds, and in particular, what is happening in tribal communities across Montana. And we heard time and time again about issues with the education system. We would hear anecdotes from elders who talked about what their experience was like, having discrimination in school. And their granddaughter would say the same exact thing. And we really started to understand how this was more of a systemic issue, and that's what launched our education equity work. And so we seek now to improve the educational environment for Indigenous students, to recognize the disparate outcomes that are occurring in our public schools. And that led us to publish a report, which is called Empty Desks. It's on our website, but really it shows the disproportionate impact of policing and discipline to Indigenous students in particular in Montana's public schools. And that has really, transformed our advocacy into what we try to do now. That's supporting Indigenous students in their classroom. That means implementing culture in curriculum. That means thinking about different models of restorative justice. It really looks different wherever you are, but what stays true to our core is to increase the knowledge of Indigenous people in this state, and that has brought us to our landmark case, which we're still in the courts, but it's Yellow Kidney v. State, where we're currently holding the state accountable to implement our Indian Education for All mandate. So that is really, again, special and historic, and something I'm really proud of this team for the way our work has evolved, and that we stick true to our principles, to be in community, to be with Indigenous people, and to be partners and collaborators, and that's something that's really powerful.
Thank you, Sharon. Next, we'll move on to talking about abortion, which now has become one of the defining issues in the country and also in the upcoming election in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's opinion overturning Roe v. Wade. Of course, that we're talking about the Dobbs decision in June. But I think a lot of people don't know that the ACLU is one of the groups on the forefront of preserving abortion rights in Montana and in the nation. We'll go to Caitlin, who's going to talk to us about what's at stake as far as abortion rights here in Montana in our current political landscape, and what the role is of ACLU of Montana in playing in this issue.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So I just want to say, first of all, on a personal note, that I spent the better part of my career on the East Coast defending the Roe versus Wade decision. And so the Dobbs decision was a huge personal blow to me. But when I moved back to Montana in 2015, one of the things that I was so proud of about our state is that we have our own constitutional protection for the right to abortion. So that came out of a 1999 decision called Armstrong versus State. And Armstrong versus State is essentially our Roe versus Wade. The Montana Constitution has an explicit right to privacy, and Armstrong held that that encompasses the right to abortion. So the Dobbs decision has no immediate impact in Montana, but certainly we know that we are immediately going to see efforts to undo the constitutional protections that we have here in this state. And that will be from all levels, from legislation, which we have seen every session. Alex will talk a little bit more about some of the court battles that are going on now to fight legislation that passed in 2021, among others. Also, we can expect to see ballot initiatives. There is actually one this fall, LR 131, that is a medically unnecessary and redundant measure that has no purpose other than to stoke anti-abortion sentiment in Montana. And we are fighting in coalition with ally organizations, some of whom are tabling here tonight, to fight that, that measure. But we can expect other types of more bans that affect earlier in pregnancy, and we will need to fight those, and hopefully Kansas will be a really good example for us, with that state having immediately the voters resoundingly rejecting an effort to ban abortion there. And then finally, I just want to turn it over to Alex to talk about a couple of cases that we are involved in impacting the right to abortion in Montana.
Thanks, Caitlin. I think before I launch into a sort of technical review of the cases that we're working on in the abortion field, it's worth noting that you're going to be hearing a lot about state courts tonight. And I oftentimes feel like I'm singing a love song to the Montana Constitution, because we are incredibly fortunate in this state to have a living document that really reflects a lot of the values that we want to see lived in everyday life. And it's fair to say that there's been a wholesale pivot away from litigation in federal courts. I probably don't need to say the reasons why, but needless to say, many of the issues that we care deeply about are percolating up to the United States Supreme Court, and that is certainly not the group of five gentlemen and a gentlewoman who we want to be deciding the important issues of the day. So, as Caitlin mentioned, here in Montana, we have, unlike in the federal Constitution, an explicit right to privacy that has been interpreted in the Armstrong decision to provide for a right to an abortion. And in the litigation context, we need to sort of hold two truths together at once. So, on the one hand, we will see, or we have seen, and we will continue to see restrictions being passed by the legislature on the right to an abortion. And we saw this most recently in 2021 with 4 bills that were passed that severely restricted the right of a person to access abortion care. Planned Parenthood, one of the very powerful and active organizations here in our state, immediately fought back, filing lawsuits relying upon the Armstrong decision, essentially stating that these new restrictions were violations of our constitutional right to procreative autonomy. And a district court judge agreed and issued a preliminary injunction several months ago enjoining those laws pending the outcome of the litigation. The state, not surprisingly, appealed immediately to the Montana Supreme Court, and in their briefing, they recognized, of course, that as long as the Armstrong case from 1999 is the law of the land, they ain't gonna make much headway when it comes to rolling back abortion rights. So they did essentially what the litigants in the Dobbs case did. They said, well, let's get rid of Armstrong, just the way that the litigants in Dobbs said, well, let's get rid of Roe. And the Montana Supreme Court said, no, we're not going there. We're gonna leave Armstrong intact, and y'all need to get your asses back to the district court and play the case out there. So we filed friend of the court briefs in support of Planned Parenthood in that case, and we will be monitoring its outcome. The second truth that we need to hold is that because of Armstrong and because of our amazing and vibrant Constitution, we actually have the opportunity here in Montana to expand abortion rights. And that becomes even more important when you look at our neighboring states, from Idaho to Wyoming to the Dakotas, where abortion, if not illegal immediately, is under severe threat as a result of the decision in Dobbs. So here in Montana, we filed an action with the Center for Reproductive Rights on behalf of an advanced practice registered nurse, Helen Weems, and a certified nurse midwife, arguing that Montana's statute, which restricts the provision of abortion to physicians and physicians' assistants, unconstitutionally interferes with an individual's right to seek medical care from the healthcare provider of their choice. Advanced practice registered nurses, certified nurse midwives, are fully competent and capable of providing abortion care. They've been determined to be competent by their licensing authority, and they're in fact already doing that in the form of miscarriage management, which is a procedure virtually identical to abortion. We were able to prevail in district court. A district court judge ruled as a matter of law that that restriction on who can provide abortion care in Montana is a violation of our right to privacy. And now that case is heading up to the Montana Supreme Court on appeal, and indeed just today we filed our opposition brief to the state's appeal. So we're holding two truths in one hand. We're fighting back against the inevitable attacks that we're going to be seeing from this legislative session, and I expect legislatures in the future, but while also doing everything that we can to use the sword to expand abortion care in Montana, where of course it's not easy to find a provider, especially in rural parts of the state. So litigation, I never see litigation as the ultimate tool to achieve all of the ends that we're seeking, but in this particular context, it has been able to, or been a vehicle for holding these two truths in the same hand.
Thank you, Alex. And before we go into our next subject, I don't know if you mentioned this, but if you have a question you'd like to ask the panel, please put it in writing, and I think they'll be collected by someone, and at the end of the main part of the panel, we'll have some of those questions and we'll pitch them out to the members of the panel. Next, we're going to talk about criminal justice reform. Now, the ACLU of Montana has long advocated for criminal legal reform, including major cases challenging jail and prison conditions and establishing the state's public defender office, the statewide public defender system. One of the ACLU of Montana's top priorities, as we heard, is the decriminalization of poverty. I'm going to go to Keegan to tell us what that means and what work ACLU is currently doing in this area.
Definitely, thanks, Mike. So the decriminalization of poverty shows itself in four main ways. So one of the ways that it shows itself is that specific laws that target and criminalize people based on poverty or based on being low income. So an example that I often give are tent bans, right? For people who are unhoused and are trying to reside on our streets, tent bans are targeting people who are unhoused. The second way that it shows itself is the way that certain laws are disproportionately applied to low-income folks. And the example that I often give for that is open container laws. So, sometimes during, I think, St. Patrick's Day weekend, right, the police look the other way when it comes to open containers and people walking around with alcohol out on the street. But sometimes the police will disproportionately apply open container laws in other instances for people who might look poor or look like they're low income or who are unhoused. And so that's the second way that the decriminalization of poverty, or at least the criminalization of poverty, the way that we see it. The third way is the way that our criminal legal system functions and the way that it sort of fines, penalizes, and then reincarcerates people through parole, probation, and fees and fines. And so that's the third way. And then the fourth way is the way being low income, so the experiences or the behaviors are criminalized. And so for that, I often give the example of the criminalization of like child neglect or child protective services, where the police or whoever it may be assessing the house or the family dynamic reads the house in a certain way because they are thinking about what it means to be low income or what it means to be poor, and then making assumptions and decisions based off of that. And so that's the four ways that we try to wrestle with this idea of criminalization of poverty. And so back in 2017, my predecessor worked on a suite of bills, but one that I want to focus on, which was HB 133, and it was a 72-page bill, so it was quite large. And what that bill did was it basically worked on Montana's sentencing laws and looked at sort of mandatory minimums, looked at different offenses, and altered the way that Montana incarcerated people and charged people. Unfortunately, we know that that direct bill is under attack in 2023. We've already seen these bills being crafted, and this is such a stunning show of cowardice by Montana policymakers, and I want to let you all know that it's a bipartisan effort, that we're seeing Democrats and Republicans attack these sentencing reforms. And it's a cowardice in response to the COVID pandemic and to the real issues that we're seeing in our streets, whether that's substance use, whether that's mental health crisis, whether that's homelessness. And we as a society and Montana policymakers lack the vision, lack the way to understand our world. The only way they know how to understand the world is to charge people and to put people in jail. And that doesn't address the root of the problem. And it is a profound failure. And so I am committed, and my team is committed to fighting this in 2023. And I'm really appreciative of everyone here because it's from you all that we sort of gain that power and that ability to reject that sort of effort. And I hope that we see some of y'all either writing or giving testimony, because we'll be in the trenches fighting this profoundly cruel policy and effort to peel back so many great things that were passed.
And Alex, do you have anything to add to that as far as what ACLU is doing in this area?
Boy, do I.
Okay. I thought you might.
Well, first of all, I mean, I think you would agree with me, Keegan, that, you know, it's an unfortunate reality that poor people, criminal defendants, people who are in prison are among the most neglected in our society. And so as a result, you know, if you're in the legislature, you don't really care, you know, how people are being treated or how these vulnerable communities are being dehumanized. So, so that's where, unfortunately, litigation is one of the only tools that we have in the toolbox to fight back. So I think it was Caitlin who mentioned that my predecessors, on whose shoulders our legal department stands, filed a lawsuit back in the early 2000s to establish the modern public defender system. Before the White v. Martz case, it was a county-by-county system that had no uniformity across the state. And as a result of that litigation, we finally saw a funded system. I won't say fully funded for reasons that I can talk about, but a funded system that created uniform standards for public defenders across the state. Unfortunately, that system is strained almost beyond the breaking point. We have seen chronic underfunding and poor management of the Office of Public Defender. And that most recently manifested in Yellowstone County, where where indigent defendants were waiting many weeks before being assigned their court-appointed counsel, and as a result, were accepting unnecessary and unfortunate plea deals in an effort to simply get out of jail pre-trial. And that is simply unacceptable. And a district court judge in Yellowstone County, Judge Donald Harris, actually held the agency in contempt for their failure to timely assign counsel. And we asked the Supreme Court, as friends of the court, to weigh in and recognize the systemic deficiencies that exist for the Office of Public Defender. That case ultimately didn't do what we were hoping that it would do, but needless to say, we remain deeply concerned, as we have been for decades now, about the state of our public defender system, and we want to make sure that the constitutional right to counsel exists for everybody and not just those who have the means. We've also used litigation in the context of bail and of the bounty hunter system. We brought a case on behalf of an individual. So imagine you miss a court date and a court issues a warrant for your arrest, and a bounty hunter picks up the bounty or decides that they're going to go collect the bounty and deliver you to jail. So imagine you're sitting in your bed with your spouse and your young child, and a bunch of Keystone cops break in your front door carrying AR-15s. Well, you don't have to imagine that, because that's exactly what happened to Eugene Mitchell right here in Lolo. And we sued not just the bounty hunters, but also the bail bondsmen and also the insurance companies that underwrite this entire for-profit industry. And we use a federal statute called RICO. And you might hear the RICO statute sort of in your Law and Order TV shows. That's typically what they use to go after the mob. Well, in my opinion, the cash bail system is essentially the mob. They are running a racket and making money off the backs of poor individuals in Montana. We also have filed litigation on behalf of incarcerated individuals. And it's an unfortunate reality that Montana State Prison, although you could say this for Crossroads or the Women's Prison or Warm Springs, is underfunded, understaffed, and it's a hellhole. And we filed a case, again, years back, but before I joined the ACLU, on behalf of prisoners at the Montana State Prison who had serious mental health issues, who were essentially being warehoused in solitary confinement. And as you might imagine, if you have paranoid schizophrenia, the last thing that you need is to be completely isolated and shut off from all human contact. And just this last year, we finally were able to settle that case with the Montana Department of Corrections, establishing some more humane standards for the treatment of individuals with mental health issues. So as I said, it's an unfortunate reality that the political will, or the political will to support indigent or poor people in Montana is not there. And so that's where courts remain as a place of last resort to make sure that those rights are vindicated.
Thanks, Alex. Excuse me. Next, we're going to talk about LGBTQ rights. As you probably know, across the nation, there's widespread attacks on LGBTQ rights, and Montana has not escaped this trend, unfortunately. We've had the banning of books like Gender Queer, the state library logo debate where some board members said the logo looked too much like the rainbow flag, and school board level debates on various student groups across the state. We're going to go back to Alex again to tell us just how the ACLU of Montana has been involved in this critical area.
Yeah, so in the LGBTQIA context, we've been extremely active in the courts, and I should shout out the other members of our legal team here. Akilah Lane, I see over there. Crystal Pickens, I think, is somewhere in the back. Total badasses and relentless advocates on behalf of LGBTQIA Montanans. So yeah, we've seen some progress recently in the federal courts, right? So we had the Obergefell decision recognizing same-sex marriage. More recently, we had the Bostock decision, which recognized that gender identity and sexual orientation have some protected class status. But as I mentioned at the outset, we're more interested in creating strong state law and relying upon state authority to establish robust and lasting protections for LGBTQ Montanans. So to that end, we represented Eleanor Maloney, a trans attorney in Yellowstone County who signed up for the health insurance policy, which had a categorical exclusion on all gender-affirming care. And we sued Yellowstone County, arguing that that categorical exclusion was discriminatory on the basis of sex, and that that protected class of sex includes your gender identity. And we had a hearing officer agree with us that as a matter of law, discrimination on the basis of sex means that you're discriminating against somebody on the basis of their gender identity. So today, if somebody is denied service, denied a public accommodation because they're trans, they have a cause of action under the Montana Human Rights Act. We also, more recently, fought back against Senate Bill 280 that was passed by the 2021 legislature. And unfortunately, I believe that this is the first of many anti-trans efforts that we are going to see out of the Montana legislature in the years to come. But this one sought to deprive trans Montanans of accurate identity documents in the form of making it virtually impossible for a trans individual to obtain an accurate birth certificate or a birth certificate that contained the correct gender marker. In order to do so, they needed to get surgery, which of course is not necessary for many people who are trans, is not cost effective for others, and then obtain a court order before going to the Department of Public Health and Human Services to amend their birth certificate. We sued, arguing that that was a violation of due process, equal protection, and privacy, and obtained a preliminary injunction from a district court out of Yellowstone County. Now, oddly, and I think that this is a reflection on the fragility of our institutions and the threats that our democracy is under, we saw executive branch agencies, including Department of Public Health and Human Services, thumb their nose at the district court and say, well, we don't really agree with that opinion, but instead of appealing it, we think we're just gonna work around it by adopting an even more draconian rule that makes it actually impossible for trans people to amend their birth certificates. We went back to the district court and we said, Judge, look, you said that the 2017 rule is still in effect. The agency didn't comply. And the judge said, well, I think my order was, this was just yesterday morning. I think my order was clear as a bell. The agency needs to process amendments to birth certificates by simple affidavit. Within hours of that decision, not only the Department of Public Health and Human Services, but the Montana Attorney General claimed that the judge's order was still vague, misapplied the law, misrepresented the party's position, and they were going to keep the rule in effect. So we see a couple of themes here. One, the executive branch of the state of Montana does not care about the judiciary. And in this particular arena, the animus towards transgender Montanans is so deep that they are willing to blatantly flout a clear and direct court order. Now, where is that coming from? That's coming from the local level. We are seeing across the state of Montana more and more activation at the school board level. In my hometown, we have had a librarian who was nearly terminated because she had the temerity to show a slideshow about Pride Month. That was just in the last few weeks. And I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin now to talk about this really troubling wave of activation against gay, lesbian, transgender people in Montana at the very local level.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so that librarian, beloved librarian as I understand it, in the Livingston School District was targeted because of a law that was passed in 2021 in the Montana legislative session. These laws are sometimes known as Don't Say Gay laws, but it requires educators to give parents and guardians 48 hours notice before they even mention anything about sexual orientation or gender identity to school kids of certain ages so that the parents can pull their kids out. And this is just part of a nationwide trend of targeting school boards, local school boards, teachers, libraries. And of course, the real victims of those attacks are lesbian, transgender, bisexual, two-spirit kids. It's incredibly, devastatingly traumatic for them. And this broader effort has been happening in Montana too, in terms of libraries, school libraries, public libraries, the efforts that Mike mentioned to remove books. One thing I want to mention that's troubling in Montana is very much unlike what I said about abortion, is that Montana actually has a constitutional amendment that was passed that restricts marriage to one man and one woman only. So we are dependent for that on the federal constitution. Our case, Rolando, that was brought, that was won the couple of months before the federal decision, was brought in federal court under the federal constitution. And so the Obergefell decision is now, I would say, on the chopping block because of the reasoning that we saw in the Dobbs decision. Justice Alito went out of his way to say that his decision did not apply to a litany of other rights that depend on privacy being read into the US Constitution. But Justice Thomas was not quite so coy, and he was very open about the fact that all of those rights are now at risk. So Montanans are really going to have to fight to protect LGBTQ rights in Montana, but particularly in the area of marriage equality. So just quickly looking ahead to the legislative session, in 2021, the ACLU of Montana dealt with 6 anti-LGBTQ bills, 3 of them passing, a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which basically gives license to people to discriminate on the basis of supposedly religion. The birth certificate measure that Alex mentioned, and a ban on LGBTQ, on transgender students participating in the sport that aligns with their gender identity. One pernicious bill that we successfully defeated alongside courageous trans activists, allies, business entities, and medical professionals, among others, that might return in 2023 is an effort to criminalize or ban gender-affirming care for youth. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Certainly this is going to be a huge issue in the coming legislative session, though.
Thank you, Caitlin. Last and certainly not least, voting rights. No doubt you know of the crusade by many followers of former President Trump to restrict voting rights based on the myth of so-called voter fraud. Those efforts have been underway in Montana, are underway in Montana. The ACLU has been opposing them and plans to continue to do so in the future. A lot of this is being fought out in the courts right now, so we're going to go back to our legal expert, Alex, to talk about the status of some of these cases. I'm sorry. We're going to start with, we'll start with Sharon. Sharon's going to talk about how voting rights affects certain people. Then we'll go to Alex after that.
Awesome. Well, before I jump into the important topic of voting, I think what I want to underscore is the attacks that are happening to all types of communities in Montana, right? These are our communities, these are our neighbors, this is us. And my plea to each and every one of you is that we need you, we need each other in these fights. When we talk about these fights in the legislature, when we talk about these attacks, we're coming up on a legislative session, and we need all of us. It's incumbent upon all of us to be engaged in that process, to write testimony, to vote. So I have a lot of things to say about voting in general, but to vote, but to show up. It's really about showing up for one another and showing that care. And there's a lot of ways you can do that, but one particular is through voting. Protecting our democracy, and in particular, the right to vote, has always been a priority for the ACLU of Montana since our founding. And while it will continue to be well into the future. Unfortunately, it truly feels like every day we're seeing more and more attempts to restrict the right to vote for historically vulnerable sections of our voting public. And in particular, I really want to hone in on Indigenous voters. That's where we see a lot of the attacks coming out of the state legislature and in our state. I've been on the ground and I've witnessed firsthand the effort it takes to make sure that our voices are heard. As we know, Indigenous people in the state have really strong collective power, and especially during election seasons, We have mobilized in really powerful ways to have our voices heard. But when you peel back all those layers and you're on the ground, you really start to see a much fuller picture. When it comes to voting, and particularly for Native votings, there are incredible barriers to access the ballot box. And if you spend time talking to voters, especially throughout the election season, you'll start hearing these things about the trials and tribulations people go through just to make sure that they can vote. And that's what brings me, hope to continue to do this work. To hear the lengths that people are willing to go to ensure that their voice can be heard. In just the past few sessions alone, and even the past few elections, there have been all types of more roadblocks put in the way. So just in the past election, we had counties refusing to create satellite offices for tribal nations. In the legislature, we've had attempts to restrict ballot collection, which is a tactic that many of our communities rely on in order to just get their ballots collected. And I think just taking a step back, you have to remember that this isn't a system that is our own. This isn't something that's familiar to Indigenous communities. This was something that was forced upon us that we are now just trying to participate in. So Natives were granted the right to vote in 1924. I'll say that again, in 1924. That wasn't even 100 years ago that we were allowed the right to vote. And when you dig deeper into that history, a lot of the times, it was much more recent than that. And I think it's really important for us to all know that history and what that history looks like in Montana, because it impacts what we see today. It impacts my ability to vote. It impacts my people's ability to vote. So I think there's endless barriers, and I'm always willing to talk about that. So if you want to come find me, happy to chat. But there's a lot of disenfranchisement that we are fighting against that's happening today. And it's going to continue to happen in this upcoming state legislature. So again, we need you. We need you to show up. We need you to write that testimony and be supportive of your neighbors. But while there's a lot of barriers to be discussed, I also want to shed light on the really important work that's being done. Amazing organizations like Western Native Voice was one of our great partners. The ACLU are really getting out there to make sure that the Native vote is heard. So right now we're in the midst of election-centered work where we have an Indigenous-focused campaign. You'll see there's posters up above us, one right here, that has the word vote translated in Indigenous languages that are home here in Montana. And we heard amazing feedback about the last time we ran this campaign of people saying, I was on Facebook and I saw this ad in my language and I've never seen that before. I thought that was so cool. That made me want to vote. That made me want to share it with somebody. And so too often I think our communities are an afterthought, but we are really doing some amazing things to center Indigenous voices. This is Indigenous-led, Indigenous-designed, and to see that coming from an organization like the ACLU is very powerful, and that's something I'm really proud of our team for doing, but fighting back in any way that we can. So it's definitely historic work from our IJ program and from our affiliate. Yeah. And as you've heard all night, our legal team has been kicking butt in many ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex to talk about those wins and fights in the court. They're a small but mighty team, and they really kick butt.
Thanks, Sharon. I feel like I periodically say with our voting cases, democracy is at stake, but that's not true. It's democracy for the most vulnerable sections of the voting public, which includes Indigenous voters, it includes disabled voters, it includes young voters, it includes elderly voters. And I'll sort of start with where things are going, and then talk about, hopefully, sort of lift up the empire striking back. So we're starting to see this really insidious narrative that's emerging from people who argue that the 2020 election was stolen. And so the big lie, according to them, is causing a cratering of confidence in the a cratering in the public's confidence in the sanctity or safety of elections. So in order to combat that cratering or crisis of confidence, the legislature is then justified in enacting voting restrictions that are supposed to prop up voter confidence. So it's this circular argument starting from a lie and ending in a lie. Now, we've been, again, successful here in Montana relying upon our explicit right to suffrage, our right to vote in our Declaration of Rights, representing Native American tribes and Native American voting rights organizations, including Western Native Voice and Montana Native Vote, fighting back against some of these restrictions. And the restrictions manifest themselves in a number of ways. So one way that they do that is by eliminating ballot collection. And the state has now tried to do this twice. And ballot collection is essentially where an organization like Western Native Voice has paid organizers out in a particular community, maybe, in Lame Deer, picking up community ballots and returning them to the county seat where they can be validly cast and counted. Never in the history of ballot collection in Montana has there been an instance of voter fraud, an instance of voter intimidation, or even a complaint filed against somebody engaging in ballot collection. Nevertheless, the legislature says, well, we're concerned about voter confidence, we're concerned about voter intimidation, and so therefore we're going to restrict ballot collection in Montana. Well, via testimony from expert witnesses who talk about the historic disenfranchisement of Native Americans in Montana, the enormous geographic distances that exist in particular in eastern Montana, the lack of residential home mail delivery on reservations, we've been able to demonstrate that these new restrictions on ballot collection place an undue burden on the right to vote for Indigenous voters in Montana. And that happened in a 2020 lawsuit in the Western Native Voice case versus Corey Stapleton, who was then the Secretary of State. And we just finished a 2-week trial in the Western Native Voice case versus the new Secretary of State, Christy Jacobson. And so we should be getting an order very soon in that case. And the other restriction that was adopted by the legislature in 2021 that's at issue in the most recent case is the elimination of Election Day registration. So we know that enthusiasm and interest in elections peaks on Election Day. And prior to enactment of HB 176, which eliminated Election Day registration, a new voter could show up at the elections office and late register in person and vote absentee on the same day. And that tens of thousands of people have relied upon Election Day registration over the decades. And in fact, the Montana voters in 2015 expressly rejected an effort to repeal Election Day registration. But undeterred, the legislature in 2021 decided that it was time for that to go. And the reason why it was time for that to go was that who relies on Election Day registration disproportionately? Young people, old people, disabled people, and Indigenous voters. So once again, those vulnerable sections of the voting population were on the chopping block, and the legislature went ahead and eliminated your ability to late register and absentee vote on Election Day. That, again, is part of the lawsuit in the Western Native Voice case that was just tried in Yellowstone County. And we feel like we put in an extremely strong record on behalf of Indigenous voters and expert witnesses, and we feel good about our chances at the district court and then up to the Montana Supreme Court. There's going to be a lot that's going to change between now and the November general, so keep your eyes peeled for late-breaking changes in the law. And as Sharon said, this is just the camel's nose under the tent for what we can expect for the next legislative session, where Keegan has told me that there are dozens now bill drafts that have been dropped aiming at restricting voting rights. And I am going to bet that the same vulnerable sections of the voting public are on the chopping block as it relates to those new proposals.
Thank you, Alex. And that ends the main part of the panel. I'd like to give a hand to all of our wonderful staffers and panelists up here tonight. I thought they did a great job of explaining what's going on here and all those issues. And now do we have some questions from the audience, I believe? And the way we're going to do this, I'm just going to ask the question, and whoever's on the panel wants to field it certainly can. And we talked a lot about the state courts, the state judiciary, and Alex, of course, talked about the state defying the judge's order in the Senate Bill 280 case, the birth certificate case. The question is, what does this mean for the future of the state courts and their power and their position to stand up to an administration or executives who want to defy them?
Do you want to answer that, Caitlin, since that was the same question you answered?
Yeah, I just spoke about this at a law school symposium today at UM. Yeah, I mean, the thing about the courts is they don't have any way to enforce their orders, right? They don't have police, they don't have armies. So respect for the courts has to come from the public and the political branches respecting them. If we don't have that, we don't have a rule of law. We have anarchy, basically. And that is what is currently happening in the Marquez case that Alex talked about. The courts exist to protect constitutional rights from infringement by government. Government is the legislature. Government is the executive branch. So the courts are the only one that can be a check on it. But we are seeing right now that this is eroding through legislative efforts in Montana and elsewhere to politicize the courts, and through these, I mean, we have no words for it. At the symposium today, someone asked a professor who had done sort of a survey of states on questions like this, if he'd ever seen an example of outright defiance like this in a state, and he said no. So we have this dubious distinction of basically having a constitutional crisis because our courts aren't being respected. The only thing, again, like Sharon said, the voters have to speak. The voters have to be informed about who's running for the Montana Supreme Court. The voters have to be informed every time the Constitution is being amended, and they have to vote on election day for statewide offices and legislators who will not, who will respect the role of the court in protecting rights.
Thank you. This next question is, I'm going to kind of add my own question as well, on top of this one question, but the main question here is, what is the plan to defend the state constitution if and when there is a supermajority of Republicans in the next legislature? And I would just, on top of that, I would also ask, given the fact that we have this fairly hostile majority in the legislature last session and probably again this coming session, what's the plan of ACLU of Montana to swim upstream against those things to accomplish the goals we've talked about tonight?
Definitely. I think the first point is something that many of us have already touched on, which is elections and voting. And, you know, I have my own relationship with voting, but this is an element here where there are so many amazing orgs. Some of them are here, tabling, Forward Montana and Western Native Voice. They're fighting right now to ensure that we don't even have to engage in that question, right? We still have a thread left of it, and we can hope that that thread stays. If it does snap, if it does break, There will be extensive fights. I think one of the ways that we can challenge a supermajority is off the assumption that Republicans are a unified bloc. Now, they do move in mass. There is animated animus against trans folks. There is attacks on voting. There is attacks on abortion. There's attacks on literally everything that is of value to our communities and to the people that are up here on the stage and to many of you out there. But that doesn't mean that there aren't fissures. These are people with egos, with personalities, with reasons for why they legislate. And so some of the strategies that we would invoke are attacking that, peeling at that, picking at that, trying to drive wedges and divisions in between a supermajority bloc to ensure that they can't move in that mass way.
Thank you. This next question is about something we haven't talked about specifically tonight. The question says there are about 4,000 developmentally disabled adults waiting many years for services in the state, and that the executive branch has not addressed that. The question is, who should fight for these folks to get services? I guess they're pointing the fingers at the ACLU, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Did you say pay? Sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
I'm sorry, what?
The end of the section, was it the executive branch should pay, or what?
It said it does not address this. It says the executive branch does not address this. The question is, who should be fighting for these folks to get the services that they're entitled to and or need?
So I think that there's a few ways that we can approach this. I think one of the ways is, again, voting. And it gets hackneyed, it gets tired to come up here and to say, to vote, to find new legislators and new state officials, but I think that's a central component of it. I think one of the ways, though, is that one party isn't going to save us, one person isn't going to save us. It's the community. It's the people that we keep around us and the people that we care. And I think one of the ways that we can sort of challenge this, and in any sort of caustic way that the executive branch treats communities in our state, is to be present for each other, to support each other, and to organize together, and to challenge, again, some of the ways that we think and act in this world. And so I think that that means confronting some of the ableism that we've been taught as people in our school system, in our workplace. And then I think it also means connecting with people who are passionate about this issue, and finding out and connecting with organizations that are doing this work, like Disability Rights Montana and other organizations, and listening to them, learning and collaborating, and then mobilizing.
Thanks. We have time for one more question, and this is, I'll try to kind of narrow this down. It's one of these questions that is so big it's almost difficult to answer, but we've talked about the decriminalization of poverty. The questioner wants to know if the ACLU or anyone is working on the underlying causes of poverty instead of just the effects of poverty in the legal system. So there's a nice, easy question to end the evening on.
Definitely. So, yeah. Don't get me in trouble, Alex. So there are those efforts, and I think some of the efforts are from the direct service providers, like the Poverello Center, like other shelters and other community organizations which are doing this work. And I think what's really exciting about this organization, the people that are up on this stage, the people that are in the audience who are part of the team, is that I really feel like we're in a place where we're challenging and confronting those foundational causes. And too often, policymakers, too often community members, we see a problem and we don't think about, again, what's driving that root cause. And so when we take an issue like substance use, whether it's fentanyl, meth, heroin, whatever it may be, and in our communities we see this substance out there. We see people using it. And we start to think and make all these assumptions about these people. And some of our community members, some of our family members might even call the police or call some other thing to get it out of the way, to move it out of the way. And I think what we need to wrestle with here is that we need to know that these sort of like root causes of substance use, of mental health crises, of any of the other issues that we've talked about today, need radical transformative change. And so we need to challenge the barriers that we've put up for ourselves on what that new world can be. The world that we're given doesn't feel good. It doesn't sit right with any of us, right? And why do we imagine a world within that sort of parameters, within that sort of like bumpers on the bowling alley, right? We can imagine a new world, and we have to start imagining that new world, and that means pushing the boundaries and challenging those root causes of those. We are committed to being on the forefront of that, and we're committed to connecting with organizations and people who are on the forefront of that sort of work.
Thanks, Keegan. I think that's a great way to end the panel. Thank you, Keegan. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Caitlin. Let's have another round of applause for our great panel tonight. And thank you, everyone, for being here, too.
You all thought you were getting away easy. Please take out your pens and paper. We're going to have a short quiz. I don't know what happened to this mic. It was just a joke. Come on. We're going to take a break now so everybody can get some food, get a drink, chat to the people around you, and we will be back in about 15 minutes. Please take this opportunity to check out the organization. I don't know what's happening. Check out the organizations that are here. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you're registered to vote. It's a thing. Also, if you get a chance, there's some envelopes around so you can make a donation to the ACLU so they can continue this work, because as you just heard, we got a lot to do. So we'll take a few minutes and we'll be right back. Thanks. Folks, we've reached the end of our intermission, so it's time for all of you to grab a seat and we'll get through the rest of the stuff. A couple of things. Just a reminder, we do have a silent auction going on at the back, and that will close when the band is playing after the end of the rest of our celebration. So if you are interested in any of the items for that, please take a moment to take a look at them. There's some very cool posters up there that I'm jealous of. And if you have not donated to the Montana ACLU and don't feel like writing a check because your bank account lives in the year of our Lord, Beyonce 2022, you can go to aclumontana.org and donate right online. It's awesome. It only takes a second. And if I'm not mistaken, you can set up a monthly donation of a very small amount that you'll barely notice that will make all the difference in the world. So, let's see. Also, if you are not on the emails from the Montana ACLU, you could do that on the website as well. Oh, sorry, I started talking before the interpreter was here. Oh, and they turned out the light on her. And most importantly, you can lend your voice to the work that we're doing at the ACLU by getting involved, by writing letters to the editor, by being involved in the political season that's going on right now, by making sure that you and your neighbors are ready and registered to vote. As a matter of fact, I was just informed by the kind folks over there that are running a registration table that National Voter Registration Day is coming up on Tuesday, and that is the day that you are allowed to go out to your neighbors and poke them in the eye to make sure that they are registered to vote. So just a reminder, everything the ACLU does is to advance human rights, civil liberties, hence the name. So your engagement, your involvement makes all the difference in the world. Got a slight change in the program, and I gotta look something up. Our next speaker this evening goes by one name alone, much like Madonna or Cher. Bradley, who uses they, them pronouns, works at the Sunrise Movement as an HR coordinator. As a first-generation college student, Bradley took full advantage of all that higher education has to offer. During their college career, Bradley was the inaugural student director of diversity and inclusion for the Associated Students of Montana State University and the inaugural marketing director for the American Indian Council. Affiliated with the Aaninin tribal nation and identifying as a queer person, Bradley brings a unique insight into justice advocacy, civic engagement, and community empowerment. Currently, Bradley advises the Bozeman United for Racial Justice. Please welcome to the stage, Bradley!
Wahe, everybody, and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. As mentioned, I am Bradley, proud member of the Aaninin Nation based in Fort Belknap Indian Reservation, and a board member of the ACLU of Montana. And I am pleased to present the ACLU of Montana's Jeanette Reagan Civil Liberties Award this evening. This award, established by the ACLU of Montana in 1991, acknowledges individuals and organizations who demonstrate the strength of character and commitment to principles exemplified by Jeanette Reagan. As I'm sure most of you know, Jeanette Reagan was the first woman elected to Congress. What you may not know is that she was a founding member of the ACLU, along with Helen Keller and Felix Frankfurter, who later became a justice of the US Supreme Court. Jeanette Reagan wasn't the kind of person to back down or to compromise her principles simply because it would make her life easier or would make more people like her. She did what she believed was right, whether that was standing up for women's suffrage or being the only person in Congress to vote against entering World War I and II. Like Rankin, the ACLU of Montana Rankin Award honorees over the years have demonstrated courage and commitment to civil liberties, and Montana is the better for it. They worked hard to protect your rights and have used the principle of what is just to guide their work in the courts, elected office, in nonprofit work, in volunteerism, and many other fields. Tonight, I am thrilled to announce our 2020 Rankin Award recipients, Ivan and Ivy Mcdonald. Because of COVID, we were not able to celebrate them publicly for the past 2 years, and tonight we are thrilled to celebrate their achievements. Our honored guests, Ivan and Ivy, were not able to make it here tonight, and they have sent in some videos that we would like to play in addition to a screener for an upcoming film. Through their filmmaking and advocacy, these siblings are an integral part of the effort to end the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Their feature documentary, When They Were Here, focuses on missing and murdered Indigenous women in Montana. Through this film, Ivan and Ivy hope to bring more awareness to this issue and to ultimately influence legislative change. Ivy is a Montana-based filmmaker, an enrolled member of the Blackfeet tribe of Browning, Montana. She graduated from the University of Montana in 2017 with a BFA in digital filmmaking. Over the last 5 years, she has produced and directed work for Showtime, ESPN, and ACLU. She was also a Fourth World Media Lab Fellow for Tracy Rector's Indigenous Filmmakers Program, and an alumni for the Firelight Media Doc Lab Fellowship. Ivan Mcdonald is a Blackfeet filmmaker based here in Missoula. He is a director and producer who focuses on Indigenous stories and experience. The most recent project he produced was Blackfeet Boxing, Not Invisible, which aired nationally on ESPN and was just nominated for a Critics' Choice Award. And now we'll hear more from Ivy and Ivan.
here, everyone. Sorry we can't be there in person, but I just wanted to say thank you to the ACLU of Montana for this incredible award and the support they have given us over the years. The support is definitely felt on every shoot we go on. I want to say thank you to my brother, to our family, to anyone who has supported us over the years, the families that have trusted us to tell their stories. When they were here has been a labor of love for so many people for the last 5 years, and I'm so excited that we're getting closer to being done with the film. And I just really wanted to thank the ACLU again for this award. It's very humbling and amazing, so thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Mcdonald. I am so honored to be receiving this award tonight with my sister Ivy, who's unfortunately battling a health issue at the moment and cannot travel. I'm so sad I'm not there in person to thank the ACLU of Montana for the support of our work. When my sister and I began our work documenting this crisis almost 7 years ago, we wanted to bring to light what we saw happening in the communities around us, but also wanted to bring to light our own family's history. Stories of lost mothers, stolen daughters, and the lives of so many taken due to the legacy of colonial violence. The ACLU of Montana was one of our first supporters and has championed our work over the last few years. We believe our work has only gained this stature due to the support of our community and the support of those in the audience. In the course of our work, we have went from advocating for legislation at the Capitol to helping with rallies and marches to on-the-ground searches with families. Within that time frame, our dedication to centering families, their stories, and their needs has not wavered. The work I do with the Snowbird Fund directly helps with that, and we have been able to fund upwards of $10,000 this year to Indigenous families searching for their missing loved ones. It has been our hope that sharing stories would bring some hope to families that are dealing with this crisis. I remember one of the first families we worked with who told us that while they may not get justice in the traditional sense, there is some justice in having their loved one's story known. It is a small but bright hope that these stories carry beyond our work, beyond our film, and beyond the maze of injustice they may run into. Our film and our work is all of the stories we do know, will know, and have known, but also believe that it is the stories that we will not know and the stories that may never be brought to light. Tonight, I would like to share the names of a few stories we do not know, but hope to know in the future. They include Lacey Marie Robinson, Frida Knows His Gun, Levi Yellow Mule, Shakaya Harding, Amy Johnson, and Hub Williamson. In continuing and sharing stories, I am honored to share a short excerpt from our film, When They Were Here. When They Were Here follows the story of a few stories on the Blackfeet Reservation, one of those being our cousin Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, who went missing on the most northern part of the reservation in 2017. The scene you will be watching is part of her story and features her sister Kimberly, and how Kimberly has dealt with the disappearance of her sister over the last few years. And again, I would just like to thank you all for your continued support of our work and the continued support in helping us address this crisis.
Driving to Browning, it's beach each year it becomes a different town, you know? It's really unique how these changes can be. You know, Browning used to be the place I knew that all my family will be here. We spent a lot of time growing up here in Browning. We grew up at Twins Lake, Heart Butte area. But then when we got older, we started to come to Browning more. Ashley stayed in Browning a lot. My dad, just a few years ago, moved here to Browning, so we were going out to Heart Butte. We didn't have to go to Heart Butte anymore. And it's really a big change. So right now we're just going by the Heavy Runner pool. The chlorine that make your eyes as red as a sunset. So I'm going to be driving past my dad's house. I'll be driving past my dad's house, and I haven't drove by my dad's house since the day that I came to clean it out, because my dad passed away in 2020. The very beginning of 2020, my dad died. With going through this with Ashley, and not knowing where to turn, and to making sure that everybody knew Ashley was missing, some of my family might have thought that going straight to media was not what was needed. But at that time, nothing was being done. You know, nothing was being done with Ashley's case, so we had to make it public. And at times I felt like I didn't have anybody on my side sometimes. But my father, no matter what, he was always on my side. And no matter what, if I had anxiety on something, he was always right where I needed him. And this was his little place that he moved to town. He moved here at this house with Ashley. And him and Ashley were staying here right before Ashley went missing. My father was so kind and he was amazing, my dad. And when Ashley went missing, it just really broke his heart. When he died, he was really sick before he passed. And that what really drove me to keep searching for Ashley, because that's when I, like, before we knew she was missing, I was messaging her and I was telling her, like, hey, Dad's sick. Like, why aren't you messaging back? Like, what are you doing? Like, Dad's in Great Falls, he's in the hospital, you know, and there's nothing. And so Dad's sitting in the hospital, I'm out there searching, you know, with family. I'm going over to the hospital, he's coming out to smoke, his belly's just big. He's just, you know, his liver's failing. And he has to know that we're up there in the mountains searching for my sister. And here, he's out there searching too when he got out of the hospital. And when he passed and when he made his journey, it wasn't where I felt peace knowing that I don't have to keep searching to make sure that we find her before he passes, because he knew. He knows exactly what happened to Ashley. He he knows he has the answers that he needed now. And that's what really, we're able to start the healing, because when he died, I stayed away for a while. Turn around, look over here. Wow. Do you see that big cross right there? Mm-hmm. That one standing, that cross, the red one. That's my dad's grave. It's a beautiful cross. Look, you can even see the moon and the stars. This is just breathtaking.
So that pretty much wraps up our evening. Thank you so much to everybody who came out tonight to support the ACLU. Thank you to everybody who supported us through the last 50 years as we've tried to make things better for all Montanans. And thank you to everybody who's donated to make sure that we can continue the good work that we're doing. There's so much that we face. Sometimes it feels like we get one step forward and then we go 2 steps back, and it's the worst cha-cha you've ever seen. I would dance now, but no. And we appreciate all that you've done. So before you leave tonight, be sure to check out the silent auction, and welcome back to the stage our band, Counting Coup, to close out the evening. Folks, once again, please welcome to the stage out of Billings, Montana, Counting Coup. Chest. What happened next was kind of a blur. We left 3 men dead and 1 badly hurt. After that, I guess I never gave it much a thought. Any man that posed a threat was a man that got shot. Only concern was getting out alive with the loot in my hand and Mary by my side.
papers I was 25, a $1,000 reward, wanted dead or alive. Dreamed up a scheme Mary could turn me in. I escaped once before, I bet you I'll do it again. Well, my death toll was doubled by the time I got done. I shot the sheriff with the deputy's gun. Was a hellacious ride back to the rendezvous with the marshal on my trail, them crow counting goose. Cock of the gun was a deafening sound. Marshal broke the silence, said, son, get on the ground. Mary drew and shot faster than lightning, and thunder rang out under red sun rising. Turned to Mary, I knew something wasn't right by the red on her lips and the fear in her eyes. In the moment I did all I know how, and a few short words is all her time would allow. And Mary said she hid it down in the hollow where we would go walking and no one would follow. We were just kids, only 13 and 12, a lifetime ago, but I remember it well. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. That's called Mary and Me, and that's on our first record. It's called Rugged, Rowdy, and Broken. I think it's time to do a little Waylon Jennings, though, huh? One, two, three. Same old tune, fiddle and guitar. Where can we take it from here? From rhinestone suits and new shining cars. It's been the same way for years. We need a change. Well, my daddy told me when I went to Nashville, son, you finally got it made. So Hank made it here. We're all sure that you will, but I don't think Hank done 'em this way. Oh, Hank didn't do 'em this way. Speeding my young life away. Tell me one more time, just so as I understand. Are you sure that Hank done 'em this way? Did old Hank really do 'em this way? I don't know. Did old Hank really do 'em this way? I don't think so. Well, I was riding number 9, heading south from Caroline. I heard the long lonesome whistle blow. Got in trouble. Just a kid, acting smart. I went and broke my darling's heart. But I guess I was just a little too young to know. Well, they took me off that Georgia main. Blow. Yeah, I heard it blow. Thank you very much. That Hank Williams tune right there. Here's one that we made up. Woke up cold, fumbling in the dark. switch threw on some guy Clark. Half humming along, let's start some coffee to brew. It gets my mind glowing, but can't hold a candle to you. They ask me why I'm drawn to such sad songs. But nothing in my short life has seemed to go so wrong. They sit right here with me and what I go through. I remember to forget what she never knew. Pacing around, got no place to go. I'm feeling homesick in my own home. It's hard to be in this house during the day, and our love still haunts this place like a shallow grave. They ask me why I'm drawn to such sad songs, when nothing in my short life has seemed to go so wrong. They sit right here with me and what I go through. I remember to forget what she never knew. Tell 'em about it. And as I sit and watch the sun go down, the old familiar feeling comes on back around, knocking me out of whatever peace I've found. And everything's askew as the shadows on the ground. I call your mom, and she reminds me of you. The tone of her voice tells me she's worried too. I got lots of people around to lean upon. Why then, God, do I feel so damn alone? They ask me why I'm drawn to such sad songs, when nothing in my short life has seemed to go so wrong. They sit right here with me and what I go through. I remember to forget what she never knew. I remember to forget the things that she put me through, but I just can't shake these things you do. Thank you very much. Thank you. This next one is one that Matt Cool behind me here on the drums, he brought to us as an idea, and we all kind of put our own little flair on it. It's called, I know it's Friday night, but it's called Swinging with My Baby on a Saturday Night. Hope you guys like it. feel alright. to left feet. 'Cause it's all I can do just to stay on the beat. I kinda lose my focus when I look in your eyes, swinging with my baby on a Saturday night. Well, up, down, turn around, out on the floor. Dancing gets you hard, it gets you begging for more. Telling you, honey, better hold on tight, swinging with my baby on a Saturday night. We're out on the floor and people gather around, 'cause we're rocking to the rhythm of electric sound. Well, the drinks are cold, the dancing's hot. We're gonna get down tonight, whether you like it or not. Well, the dancing's almost over, but my feet ain't sore. So we'll go another round before we head out the door. So let's dance all night, swinging with my baby on a Saturday night. Well, up, down, turn around, out on the floor. The way my baby wiggles got me begging for more. I'm telling you, honey, better hold on tight, swinging with my baby on a Saturday night. Oh, thank you all very, very much. Thank you. We're Counting Cool. We're from Billings, Montana. Thank you so much, ACLU, for having us here tonight. This is our first time in Missoula, first of many, I hope. Hope to be back and hope to see some familiar faces next time, too. All right, we got a couple more for you guys, if that's all right. Yeah? All right. This song is about a particular lady of the night from a Willie Nelson tune called The Red-Headed Stranger. And we heard you call this one up here. That's right. There's never going to be a day I make up a song and I hear somebody yell that song and I don't want to play it, you know. That'll never happen. But this is called The Yellow-Haired Lady's Lament, and you listen to the story in The Red-Headed Stranger to get the other half. This one's kind of her side of the story. Yellow hair pulled up and her dress billows down. For a couple of dollars, could be the other way around. She's sitting in the saloon, shooting the breeze with a girlhood friend whom she rarely sees. She says, when first I left Butte, I had ambitions to find a husband in Billings, maybe further down the line. But my dreams drew darker with the starving girl's blues. And a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. And Mary, won't you take some money that I've put aside. All I need is a horse, if you take me, of course. And I can leave Blue Rock behind. Well, I don't look like much, but I'm doing alright. I dream away the days, and I work every night. Well, some of them are strangers, and some I know well. And who's fooling who? Sometimes I can't tell. But Mary, won't you take me with you? I've got some money that I've put aside. All I need is a horse, if you take me, of course. And I can leave this life behind. Sing it to him real sad now. John Prine might tell you, darling, that dreaming just comes natural, like the first breath of a baby, like sunshine feeding daisies, like love hidden deep in your heart. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everybody here at ACLU to put this thing on. I want to thank Lane and Mike, especially for treating us so nice here tonight. This has been a really good time here at the Wilma. And we got one more song for you. And do you guys know what counting coup means? Yeah? A lot of people do. For those of you that don't, counting coup is a Native American display of bravery. Sometimes done in battle. There are many ways to do it. But the idea is to go up to your enemy and strike him. And not to kill him, but to show him that you could have and you didn't, that you're not afraid. And the more times you do this, the more you count coup, the more distinguished of a warrior you are. And this is something that we try to take with us everywhere that we go, this counting coup, this striking, and this bravery. I want to thank you guys again for being so nice to us tonight, having us here in Missoula. We are counting coup. This will be our final number here tonight. Myself. Darling, my mind. Give too much and I take too little. Guess I always like to starve and know. Now I want more, but you're closing up on me. Guess I'll get on down the road. That's still me. You give too much and I take too little. Guess I always like to starve, you know. Now I want more, but you're closing up on me. Guess I'll get on down the road. Thank you very much. We are Counting Coup. Thank you, ACLU. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you.